Korean Mafia boss was already halfway out the door, his security team flanking him like a wall of iron. He had just vowed to burn the restaurant to the ground because someone had dared to look him in the eye. The head server was turning gray. The sommelier was whispering prayers, and the entire dining room had become a tomb of held breath. It was over. But then a black waitress who hadn't said a word all night stepped into his shadow. She didn't apologize in English. She didn't beg for mercy. She looked at the man who could end her with a snap of his fingers and whispered a phrase in a dialect so ancient, so specific to his dead mother's village, that Ga Jinsang froze as if he'd been shot. What she said didn't just stop him from leaving. It exposed a betrayal that would tear apart the most dangerous crime family in 3 continents. The air in Belmont House tasted like old money and fresh terror. Joyce Piercely smoothed her apron for the 3rd time in as many minutes, a nervous habit she'd developed during her first week of service. The fabric was standard issue black, designed to make servers disappear into the mahogany paneling and silk wallpaper. 3 months she'd been here. 3 months of carrying plates worth more than her monthly rent, of memorizing wine pronunciations she'd never be able to afford, of becoming furniture with a pulse. Desmond Finch materialized beside her, reeking of bergamot cologne and cortisol. His cufflinks caught the light, little daggers of reflected chandelier glow. "Table 7 arrives in 4 minutes, he hissed, close enough that she could see the broken capillaries in his nose. "Do you comprehend what that means?" "Ga Jinsang, sir." "Mr. Ga." Desmond's face achieved a shade of purple found only in expensive bruises. "He moves container ships full of luxury goods through ports that technically don't exist. Men who inconvenience him have a documented tendency to vanish. If his water dips below 3/4, you're finished. If he has to gesture for service, you're done. If you breathe audibly near his table, Joyce, I will personally salt the earth of your career. Crystal clear." She nodded, reaching for the water pitcher. The ice spheres inside clinked like wind chimes at a funeral. She needed this job the way drowning people need air. Her father's neurosurgeon in Geneva had been direct. $500,000 or start planning the memorial service. The tumor was aggressive. Time was a luxury they couldn't afford. Her linguistics degree, her fieldwork credentials, her publications in academic journals nobody read, none of it paid for experimental brain surgery. But Belmont House tips could buy her father another week, another month, another chance. At 8:47 p.m., the main doors opened, and oxygen left the room. Ga Jinsang didn't enter. He invaded. The black suit he wore probably cost more than her student loans, cut so precisely it looked like violence wearing silk. A serpentine tattoo coiled up his neck, disappearing beneath his collar, the kind of ink that told stories in scar tissue and blood oaths. 4 security personnel flanked him, men carved from granite and bad intentions. Behind them, an older gentleman in wire-rimmed glasses carried a leather portfolio like it contained launch codes. Desmond practically genuflected. "Mr. Ga, such an honor, truly a privilege." Jinsang walked past him as if he were vapor. He sat at table 7 without acknowledging the chair being pulled out for him, without glancing at the menu that had been calligraphed by hand that morning. He checked his watch. The gesture felt like a countdown to detonation. "Soju, HWAO 41, neat. If the galbi arrives less than perfect, I'm converting this establishment into a parking structure by Wednesday." His voice was gravel wrapped in silk, Korean-accented English that had been sharpened in international boardrooms and back-alley negotiations. "Immediately, sir." Desmond snapped his fingers at Philip, the server who usually coasted on jawline and charm. "Philip, soju service. Joyce, banchan, move." Philip was shaking. Joyce could see it from across the floor, the tremor in his hands as he lifted the crystal bottle and tray. She wanted to warn him to take the service herself, but the hierarchy at Belmont House was feudal and absolute. The disaster unfolded in terrible slow motion. Philip's thumb slipped. Just millimeters. Just enough. The bottle tipped, and premium soju cascaded across Ga Jinsang's immaculate sleeve in a stream that caught the chandelier light like liquid diamonds. The silence that followed had teeth. Philip went the color of old bone. "Oh God, sir, I'm so sorry, please." He reached forward with a napkin, compounding the catastrophe. Do not touch me. Jinsang's voice could have frozen mercury. He stood. Soju dripped from his cuff-onto marble that had been imported from Carrara at criminal expense. He looked at Philip. At Desmond, who appeared to be experiencing full systemic failure. At the older man with glasses, Duong, who adjusted his frames with the faintest suggestion of a smile. I was informed, Jinsang said, each word a scalpel, that Belmont House represented London's finest dining. I see now that I was sold fiction. Mr. Ga, please, Desmond's hands clasped in supplication. We'll replace the suit. The meal is complimentary. I'm begging you. You'll do nothing. Jinsang cut him off with surgical precision. One phone call and this building transfers ownership by dawn. My first executive action will be terminating every single employee. My attorneys will contact you regarding damages. And Finch, he leaned close, update your CV. He turned. The security detail pivoted like a military formation. It was finished. The entire staff watched their futures walking toward the exit. Desmond made sounds like something dying in tall grass. Philip had gone catatonic. The sommelier wept silently into his apron. Joyce felt her hands move before her brain authorized the action. She stepped into Jinsang's path. Not blocking him, that would have been suicide, but occupying the space directly ahead with a presence that made him stop. Their eyes met. His were obsidian, empty of everything except the capacity for violence. Hers were steady, carrying something that looked dangerously close to recognition. Then she spoke, not English, a dialect so rare that Jinsang's entire security team went rigid. The syllables were guttural, musical, weighted with a grief that transcended translation. She spoke 6 words that his grandmother had taught her in a mountain village 7 years ago. 6 words that meant, remember your father's path. Your mother's shadow is not a lie. The security team stiffened. Duong's smile evaporated. Desmond looked like he was witnessing either a miracle or a murder and couldn't distinguish between them. Jinsang stared at her, as if she'd materialized from his nightmares wearing flesh. Where did you learn that? His whisper carried more menace than his earlier shout. Joyce didn't flinch. From your grandmother. Duong stepped forward, voice sharp as a knife behind silk. Mr. Ga, we should leave immediately. This is clearly some theatrical. Jinsang's hand rose, silencing him. Specifically, where? Gianju, a village outside the city proper. 7 years ago, I was documenting endangered dialects for my research. Joyce's voice remained level, academic. Your grandmother was the last fluent speaker of that particular Gialato variant. She taught me for 6 months before she died. The word died landed like a grenade. Jinsang's jaw tightened. My grandmother's death was ruled accidental. Was it? Joyce held his gaze. Because her last words to me were instructions, in case I ever met her grandson, in case the ledger ever needed translation. Duong went very still, the kind of stillness that precedes violence. Jinsang's hand moved to his collar, fingertips brushing the serpentine tattoo. What ledger? The spirit ledger, written in mixed dialect, Gialato base structure with classical grammar. She said only someone outside the family could read it safely. Someone they wouldn't expect. Joyce paused. Someone they wouldn't kill immediately. This is absurd, Duong interjected smoothly. Mr. Ga, this woman is clearly attempting to. Wait. Jinsang's tone made it a command. He studied Joyce with the intensity of someone reading a contract for hidden clauses. My grandmother died in a house fire. You're claiming you knew her, that she prepared you for this conversation. She told me you'd have a tattoo of a serpent on your neck, that you'd smell like sandalwood and gunpowder, that you'd trust nobody, especially not the man who calls you younger brother but treats you like a weapon. Joyce glanced briefly at Duong. She said the ledger would explain everything. Who killed your father? Who's positioning you for execution? Who's been stealing the family's soul, one lie at a time? Jinsang's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. If you're lying, I'll find out, and what happens next will make tonight's embarrassment look merciful. If I'm lying, Joyce said quietly, Then ask yourself why Do-seung is sweating. Every head turned. Do-seung's forehead glistened under the chandelier light. His hand had moved inside his jacket, resting on something metallic. Jin-sang's voice dropped to absolute zero. Are you armed in my presence? The question hung in the air like a blade. Do-seung smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Simply cautious. This woman appears from nowhere, speaks dead languages, makes wild accusations. Schedule a car, Jin-sang interrupted. We're taking the waitress with us. If she's telling the truth, she's the only person who can decode my inheritance. If she's lying, he looked at Joyce, then she'll disappear more thoroughly than my grandmother did. Joyce's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained calm. I'll need to make a phone call. My father requires medication updates. You'll do that from the car. Jin-sang gestured to his security. Bring her, gently for now. As hands gripped her elbows, firm but not bruising, Joyce caught Do-seung's expression. The older man's smile had returned, but now it carried the edge of something predatory, something patient. He thought she was going to die tonight, which meant he didn't know what the spirit ledger actually contained. Which meant Jin-sang's grandmother had kept at least one secret from the man who'd probably murdered her. The restaurant doors closed behind them. London's cold night air hit Joyce's face like a slap of reality. A black Mercedes idled at the curb, exhaust ghosting in the streetlight. She was either about to save her father's life or end her own. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could hear her mentor's voice, speaking that ancient dialect. The truth is a map, but every map requires blood to read. The Mercedes smelled like leather and threat. Joyce sat between two security guards who breathed like furnaces, their bulk making the spacious interior feel like a coffin. Jin-sang occupied the seat across from her, Do-seung beside him, both men studying her with the focused attention of predators deciding which part to bite first. Tell me about the day she died. Jin-sang's voice was soft. That made it worse. Joyce forced her breathing to stay even. October 14th, 7 years ago, I arrived at her home around dawn to continue our translation work. The house was already burning. And yet you escaped unharmed. Do-seung's tone carried the weight of accusation wrapped in silk. I wasn't inside. I was walking up the hill when I saw the smoke. Joyce met his gaze. By the time I reached the door, the heat was too intense. I heard her voice from inside calling out, not screaming, calling, like she wanted someone to hear her final words. Jin-sang's knuckles went white against his knee. What did she say? She spoke in the old dialect, the one she'd been teaching me. She said, the serpent sleeps in the house of his father. The sun must wake him before the shadow strikes. The ledger is buried where the rice wine ages. Joyce paused. Then she said your name just once, and the roof collapsed. The car interior went so quiet Joyce could hear the tick of Jin-sang's watch. My grandmother was 83 years old, he said finally. Lived alone in a wooden structure heated by a kerosene stove. The investigator ruled it accidental, faulty equipment. Investigators rule what they're paid to rule, Joyce said. Did you see the body? Jin-sang's jaw tightened. She was cremated before I could arrive from Seoul, traditional Buddhist ceremony. Do-seung handled the arrangements. Joyce watched Do-seung's face remain perfectly neutral, a mask of professional grief, but his left hand had curled into a fist against his thigh. How convenient, she said softly. Do-seung's smile was razor-thin. Mr. Ga, this woman is clearly exploiting your grief. A common con artist's technique, research the target, fabricate emotional connections, extract resources. I recommend we terminate this waste of time. Terminate, Joyce repeated. Interesting word choice. Is that what you did to his grandmother? Terminate her before she could tell him the truth about his father's death. The temperature in the car dropped 10 degrees. Jin-sang leaned forward. You claim to know about my father. I claim to know what your grandmother told me, that your father didn't die in a territorial dispute like the family believes, that he was preparing to leave the organization, that he kept records, names, dates, transactions, betrayals, all written in a code only he and your grandmother understood. Joyce held his stare. She spent 6 months teaching me that code, not because she trusted me, because she knew everyone else who could read it was already dead or compromised. Fairy tales, Duong said. Mr. Ga, your father died 15 years ago in a Yakuza ambush in Busan. We have photographs, witnesses. His funeral drew 500 mourners. You have a story, Joyce corrected. Stories are just agreed-upon lies. Your grandmother knew the difference. That's why she hid the ledger where only someone outside the family could find it. Jinsang's eyes narrowed. Where? Joyce shook her head. First, I need assurance. My father requires surgery. $500,000. I decrypt the ledger you pay for his treatment. That's the transaction. You're negotiating, Duong laughed, brittle and sharp. You're in a vehicle surrounded by armed men. You have no leverage. I have the only skill set that matters. Kill me, and the ledger stays encrypted forever. Your father's final testimony dies with me. Joyce looked at Jinsang. But I don't think you want that. I think you've spent 15 years wondering if the story you were told was true. I think you see the holes in it. I think you wake up at 3 a.m. asking yourself why your father would walk into an obvious trap without backup. Jinsang's silence was answer enough. The surgery is approved, he said finally, on the condition that you deliver the ledger intact. Lie to me and the money stops. Your father dies slowly while you watch. Joyce felt ice crystallize in her chest, but she nodded. Agreed. Now, where is it? Your family estate. The original compound in Gianju. There's a cellar beneath the old kitchen where your grandfather aged rice wine. The ledger is sealed in a metal box behind the 4th cask from the eastern wall. Duong's face finally cracked, just a flicker, a tightness around the eyes. That property was sold 8 years ago, demolished. There's a commercial development there now. No, Jinsang said slowly. The sale fell through, legal complications with the deed. The compound has been vacant since my grandmother died. He looked at Duong. You told me it was sold. I was misinformed by the accounting department. You run the accounting department. Silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Jinsang pulled out his phone. We're going to Gianju, tonight. I want the property secured and the cellar excavated by dawn. He started typing, then paused. And Duong, you're coming with us. I want you present when we open that box. Duong's smile returned, but his eyes had gone flat. Of course, though I suspect we'll find nothing but rice wine and rot. Then you have nothing to worry about, Joyce said. The older man's gaze slid to her, and for just a moment, she saw the calculation behind his glasses. He was recalibrating, adjusting his strategy. A chess player who just realized his opponent knew moves he thought were secret. Jinsang made 3 more calls in rapid Korean. Joyce caught fragments, instructions about helicopters, security teams, legal access. His voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone used to moving money and men with equal ease. When he finished, he looked at her. The flight leaves in 90 minutes. You'll stay within arm's reach until this is resolved. If you try to run, I'll have your father moved to a facility where they spell morphine with a maybe. I'm not running, Joyce said. I want what you want, the truth. What I want, Jinsang said quietly, is to know if the man I've spent 15 years avenging was actually murdered by someone sitting 3 feet away from me. Duong stiffened. Jinsang, you can't seriously. I can seriously whatever I decide to seriously. Jinsang's tone could cut glass. My father taught me to trust actions over words, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to dig up that cellar. We're going to open that ledger. And if it says what I think it's going to say, then we're going to have a very different conversation about loyalty. The car pulled into a private airfield. Through the tinted windows, Joyce could see a helicopter on the tarmac, rotors already spinning. Men in tactical gear stood at attention. Duong leaned close to Jinsang. Whatever this woman has told you, remember, she's a stranger. I've stood beside you for 20 years. I held you when your father died. I've bled for this family. Then you have nothing to fear from the truth, Jinsang said. They exited the vehicle into rotor wash that tasted like jet fuel and cold November air. Joyce's hair whipped across her face as security guided her toward the helicopter. She caught a glimpse of Duong pulling one of the guards aside, whispering something urgent. The guard nodded. A language is just a map of where the bodies are buried. And Joyce was about to hand Ginseng a map written in his dead father's handwriting. As they climbed into the helicopter, she wondered if Duong had already made calls of his own. If there would be people waiting in Gianju. If the cellar would be empty when they arrived, evidence conveniently destroyed. Ginseng sat across from her, his face unreadable in the cabin's red emergency lighting. "My grandmother used to tell me stories," he said over the engine noise, "about a tiger who trusted a snake because the snake spoke beautifully. The tiger died with poetry in its ears." "Is that a warning?" Joyce asked. "It's a promise. If you're the snake, I'll know before we land." The helicopter lifted, London falling away beneath them into a grid of light and shadow. Joyce closed her eyes and heard her mentor's voice again, that ancient dialect forming words that felt like prophecy. "The sun will come. He will not believe you, but the ledger will speak louder than ghosts." She hoped to God the old woman was right. Because if that cellar was empty, Joyce would be dead before sunrise. And Duong's smile suggested he was counting on exactly that. The helicopter hadn't even touched down in Gianju when Joyce's phone vibrated. She almost ignored it. Reception at 12,000 feet was spotty at best, but the notification preview made her blood freeze. Security alert, motion detected in living room, camera offline. Her flat, someone was in her flat. Ginseng noticed her face change. Problem. Joyce's mind raced. She'd left London 2 hours ago. Duong had been in the car with them, then the helicopter. But he'd made that call before boarding. That whispered conversation with the guard. "My home security system just triggered." She kept her voice level, but her pulse was hammering. "Someone's inside." Ginseng pulled out his phone, tapped twice. "Address." She gave it to him. He forwarded it to someone, then met her eyes. "I'll have people there in 8 minutes. What are they looking for?" "My research. Field notes from Gianju, linguistic documentation, anything that proves I actually studied with your grandmother." Joyce's stomach twisted. "Or anything that reveals where the ledger is hidden." Duong, seated 3 rows back, leaned forward. "Convenient timing. Perhaps you arranged this yourself. Sympathy play to solidify Mr. Gau's trust." "Or perhaps," Joyce said coldly, "someone wanted to make sure I couldn't prove my credentials before we reached the compound." The helicopter descended into darkness broken only by airfield lights. The moment the skids touched asphalt, Ginseng was moving. "Get her to the car. Duong, you're with me. I want eyes on that apartment now." They transferred to a Range Rover that smelled new and expensive. The driver navigated Gianju's streets with surgical precision, while Ginseng's phone became a command center. On speaker, a voice crackled through. "We're approaching the building now. Top floor, correct?" "3rd floor, Unit 7, Joyce said. Her hands were shaking. Everything she'd worked for was in that flat. 7 years of field recordings, her grandmother's teaching methods, proof that she wasn't some con artist spinning fairy tales. "Entry team is in the stairwell," the voice reported. "Doors been forced, locks destroyed, moving in." "Static, then. Jesus Christ." Ginseng's jaw tightened. "Report." "It's a massacre. Someone tore this place apart. Books everywhere, furniture gutted, floorboards pried up, still searching for occupants." Joyce closed her eyes. Her father's photo. Her mother's quilts. The acoustic recordings of her mentor speaking that ancient dialect, the only proof those lessons had actually happened. "Wait," the voice said. "We've got 2 males in the bedroom, armed. Looks like they're still searching." "Detain them," Ginseng ordered. "I want them alive and conversational." Sounds of shouting, a brief scuffle. Then, "Secured, both subjects in custody. One's asking for a lawyer, the other's asking for Duong." The car went silent. Ginseng turned slowly to look at the older man. "Interesting." Duong's expression remained perfectly calibrated, concerned, confused, just the right amount of offended. I don't know anyone in London's criminal underground. This is clearly another manipulation. Put him on speaker, Ginseng said into the phone. A new voice, younger, with an East London accent sharpened by panic. I want to speak to Duong. He hired us. He said this was corporate espionage, legal gray area. We were just supposed to find documents and photographs. That's it. We didn't hurt anyone. Duong didn't even blink. I've never heard this man's voice in my life. Mr. Ga, someone is framing me, using your family name to hire criminals, knowing you'd make this exact connection. Describe the man who hired you, Ginseng said into the phone. Korean, 60s, glasses, expensive suit. Met us at a pub in Southwark yesterday. Paid half up front, cash. Said the other half would be wired when we delivered. A pause. He showed us a photo of the woman. Said she'd stolen proprietary translation algorithms from his tech company. Said we needed to recover the source documents before she sold them to competitors. Joyce felt ice spread through her chest. What photo? You, outside this building. He had surveillance shots from 3 different angles, time-stamped from last week. How did they find her so fast? She'd been invisible at Belmont House. Anonymous. Just another server in black fabric and forced smiles. Unless. The restaurant, she said. Someone at the restaurant gave them my information. Ginseng's eyes narrowed. Who knew you'd be working that shift? The entire staff. The schedules posted 48 hours in advance. Joyce's mind was racing through faces, conversations, small interactions she dismissed as meaningless. But my address isn't in the staff files. That's kept in management's office. Only Desmond Finch and the owner have access. Duong spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. So we're looking for a corrupt manager or a data breach, not a conspiracy. Then explain, Ginseng said softly, why these men are asking for you by name. I can't explain delusions or coaching. Perhaps your new friend here fed them that information before calling you. Duong's voice carried the patience of a teacher with a slow student. Think, Ginseng. She appears from nowhere, speaks a dead language, claims secret knowledge, and now conveniently her home is ransacked, creating urgency and emotional leverage. This is textbook manipulation. Joyce wanted to scream, but her academic training kicked in. When someone denies evidence, provide more evidence. Ask them what they were searching for, specifically. Ginseng relayed the question. Documents about a Korean woman named, Static crackled. Something that sounded like Halmione, recordings of her voice, and anything about a ledger or vault. He said the ledger was the priority. If we found any reference to its location, we were supposed to call him immediately before continuing the search. The silence in the car was absolute. Ginseng's voice dropped to permafrost levels. How did they know about the ledger? Duong's composure finally cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but Joyce saw it. A tightness around his mouth, a millisecond of calculation behind his eyes. Perhaps she mentioned it to someone. Perhaps this entire situation is theater. I told exactly 2 people about the ledger, Joyce said. Your grandmother before she died, and you two 90 minutes ago in the car. Lies, Duong said. You could have told anyone, former colleagues, family members. My field notes are encrypted, Joyce interrupted. Stored on a hard drive that requires biometric access. The only physical copies were in my flat, hidden inside a hollowed-out linguistics textbook on my shelf. How would anyone know to look there unless they knew exactly what they were searching for? Ginseng leaned forward. Did they find a textbook? The voice on speaker. Yeah, phonological variations in endangered Korean dialects. Spine's been cracked open, empty inside. Joyce's heart stopped. No. What was in it? Ginseng demanded. A key, brass, antique. Your grandmother gave it to me the day before she died. She said it opened the metal box in the cellar, said it was insurance, proof that I was supposed to be the one to retrieve the ledger. Joyce's voice cracked. Without it, we can't open the box, even if we find it. Duong actually smiled. How unfortunate. Ginseng stared at him, really stared, like he was seeing the man clearly for the first time. You knew about the key. I knew nothing. My grandmother never mentioned a key to me, never mentioned a ledger, never mentioned this woman. But somehow, these hired criminals knew exactly what to look for and exactly where to find it. Jinsang's hand moved to his waistband. Who did you call before we boarded the helicopter? Security coordination, standard protocol. Show me your phone. Du-seung's smile turned patronizing. Jinsang, you're being irrational, grief and paranoia. Show me your phone. The two men locked eyes. In the front seat, the driver's hand drifted toward his jacket. In the back, Joyce pressed herself against the door, suddenly aware that she was trapped in a steel box with two apex predators circling each other. Du-seung handed over his phone. You'll find nothing. Jinsang scrolled. His face went stone. You called a London number 18 minutes before takeoff. Lasted 47 seconds. Want to guess whose phone I'm about to have my people call? Wrong number. Misdialed. Jinsang hit dial. On speaker a phone rang and rang. Then, yeah. The same East London accent from her flat. Jinsang ended the call. When he looked at Du-seung, there was nothing human left in his eyes. I'm going to ask you one question. Answer honestly, and maybe you live long enough to see a courtroom. Lie, and I'll leave pieces of you across 3 provinces. He leaned close enough that Joyce could see Du-seung's reflection in his pupils. Did you kill my grandmother? Du-seung's mask finally shattered. What emerged underneath was something cold and patient and utterly devoid of remorse. Your grandmother was a sentimental fool who would have destroyed everything your father built. Yes, I killed her. Just like I killed him when he decided family was more important than empire. The car swerved. The driver cursed. Joyce's world tilted 90 degrees. Jinsang had Du-seung by the throat, slamming him against the window hard enough to crack glass. Where's the key? Du-seung laughed, a wet, choking sound. Already gone, melted down, destroyed. You'll never open that box. Your father's testimony dies in the dark, exactly where it belongs. Jinsang's hand tightened. Du-seung's face went purple. Wait, Joyce said. Don't kill him, not yet. Both men looked at her. The key wasn't unique, she said. Your grandmother told me it was a replica, a copy of the original which she said was... Joyce closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember the exact words. With the tiger who sleeps in jade. Jinsang released Du-seung, who collapsed gasping. My father's crypt. He was buried with a jade tiger pendant. Then we dig him up, Joyce said. Tonight, before Du-seung's people realized the key they stole was bait. Du-seung's laugh turned into a cough. You'll never make it. I have 30 men converging on that compound. The moment you arrive, you're dead. Jinsang pulled a gun from his waistband. Then it's fortunate I have 31. He made a call, spoke rapid-fire Korean, ended it. We're going to the cemetery first, he told the driver, and we're bringing a shovel. Joyce looked out the window at Gianju's lights bleeding past. Somewhere in the city, a dead man held a key to his own murder confession. And somewhere behind them, an army was mobilizing to make sure that confessions stayed buried. She'd come to Korea to save her father. Now she'd be lucky to save herself. The graveyard sat on the edge of Gianju like a mouth full of stone teeth. Jinsang's phone lit his face in blue-white strobes as updates flooded in. Security positions, aerial surveillance, confirmation that Du-seung's network was mobilizing faster than projected. They had maybe 40 minutes before this became a war zone. Your father's condition has deteriorated. The text came from Joyce's phone, her brother's number. She read it 3 times, each word a small detonation in her chest. Seizures. They're prepping him for emergency stabilization. The surgeon says without the deposit, they're moving him to palliative care. Jinsang didn't look up from his screen. Wire transfers already processing. He'll have the best neurological team in Geneva on standby within the hour. If we're alive in an hour, Joyce said. Optimism. I appreciate that. Du-seung sat zip-tied in the back row, mouth duct-taped, watching them with eyes that promised elaborate revenge. 2 guards flanked him, but Joyce could see him calculating anyway. Men like Du-seung always had contingencies. Escape routes. Loyal soldiers willing to die for a larger payday. The Range Rover pulled through cemetery gates that hadn't been oiled in a decade. They shrieked like souls in complaint. The driver cut the headlights, navigating by moonlight and GPS. Jinsang's family plot occupied the northeastern corner, traditional stone markers surrounded by manicured grass that looked black in the darkness. 5 minutes, Jinsang said to his team. In and out. I want thermal scans on every approach vector. Anything warm-blooded that isn't us gets a warning, then a bullet. They exited into November cold that smelled like earth and old incense. Joyce counted 8 security personnel spreading out in tactical formation, night vision goggles transforming them into insectoid shadows. One of them handed Jinsang a compact shovel that looked too small for the job. This is insane, Joyce whispered. Desecrating your father's grave based on a riddle from a dead woman. My father would approve. Jinsang moved toward a marker engraved with characters Joyce couldn't read. He used to say the dead keep better secrets than the living. Let's find out if he was right. The first shovel strike sounded obscenely loud. Joyce flinched, expecting alarms or searchlights or the hand of God to reach down and stop this blasphemy. Instead, there was only the rhythmic chunk of metal biting dirt. Jinsang worked with mechanical efficiency, his expensive suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. Sweat darkened his collar despite the cold. Movement southeast perimeter. One of the guards spoke into his radio. 2 vehicles, blacked-out SUVs, they just killed their engines a quarter-mile out. Time, Jinsang didn't stop digging. 4 minutes until they're in engagement range. Joyce's lungs felt too small. They found us. They were always going to find us. Duong had a tracker sewn into his jacket lining. I left it active. Jinsang drove the shovel deeper. Let them think they're hunting us, keeps them predictable. You're using us as bait. I'm using myself as bait. You're just proximity damage. The shovel hit something solid, not wood, metal. Jinsang dropped to his knees, scraping dirt away with bare hands. A steel vault door emerged, maybe 3 feet square, sealed with a combination lock that looked military-grade. Of course, Joyce breathed. Your family doesn't do anything halfway. 3 minutes, the guard reported. They're deploying on foot, counted 8 hostiles, likely more in reserve. Jinsang spun the combination dial with movements too fast to follow. The lock clicked open on his 3rd attempt. Inside, red silk lined a space barely large enough for an urn and personal effects. A jade tiger pendant lay coiled on the fabric, catching moonlight like frozen fire. Beneath it, a brass key identical to the one stolen from Joyce's flat. Your grandmother wasn't sentimental, Joyce said. She was strategic. She was both. That's what made her dangerous. Jinsang pocketed the key and the pendant. Close it up. We're leaving. Sir, they're splitting into 2 groups. 4 approaching from the south, 4 circling west. They're trying to box us in. Jinsang's jaw tightened. Where's our exit vector? North gate, but they'll have it covered in 90 seconds. Then we go through them. Jinsang signaled his team. Suppressive fire on my mark. The woman and I go first. Duong stays zip-tied in the vehicle. If I die, execute him and deliver his body to the commission with my regards. Duong's eyes went wide behind the duct tape. They moved in formation toward the Range Rover. Joyce stayed low, her academic instincts screaming that this wasn't her world, that she should be in a library, not a graveyard firefight. But her father's face flashed through her mind, gray, diminished, time running out like sand through surgical gloves. The first shot shattered a gravestone 3 feet to her left. Contact. The guard dropped flat, returning fire in controlled bursts that lit the cemetery in orange-white flashes. Joyce's ears rang. Jinsang grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a marble angel that had probably cost more than her education. Can you run? He shouted over the gunfire. Can I what? Run, sprint, move faster than a frightened deer. I ran collegiate track. Perfect. On 3, we make for the vehicle. Don't stop. Don't look back. If I go down, you keep moving. The driver knows where the compound is. Get the ledger. Finish this. Joyce's heart hammered against her ribs. "You're not going down." 1. Ginseng checked his weapon, a matte black handgun that looked designed for efficiency over intimidation. 2. More gunfire. Someone screamed. Joyce couldn't tell which side. 3. They ran. Joyce's legs remembered muscle memory from university. Pump your arms, drive your knees, breathe through your nose. Muzzle flashes turned the night into a strobe-lit nightmare. Something whistled past her ear, too close, carrying the thermal wake of near death. Ginseng fired twice without breaking stride, and someone in the darkness stopped shooting. The Range Rover was 20 feet away. 15, 10. A figure materialized from behind a crypt, stocky, armed, raising his weapon at Joyce's center mass. She couldn't dodge. Physics wouldn't allow it. Time crystallized into amber slow motion, and she watched his finger tighten on the trigger with the detached curiosity of someone watching their own execution. Ginseng slammed into her from the side. They hit the ground in a tangle of limbs. The shot went wide, sparking off the Range Rover's hood. Ginseng rolled, firing 3 times from his back. The shooter dropped. "Move!" Ginseng hauled her upright. Her niece screamed in protest. She'd landed on gravel, torn something, but adrenaline was a beautiful anesthetic. They reached the vehicle. Doors opened from the inside. Hands pulled Joyce into leather-scented safety while Ginseng provided covering fire. The driver didn't wait for orders. The engine roared, and they were moving before the doors fully closed. Bullets stitched across the rear window, safety glass spiderwebbing but holding. Joyce pressed herself into the footwell, breathing in gasps that tasted like copper and terror. "Status," Ginseng barked into his radio. 2 hostiles down, 3 retreating. We're mobile in separate vehicles, regrouping at Rally Point Alpha. The Range Rover took a corner at a speed that defied municipal engineering. Joyce's stomach lurched. In the back row, Duong watched everything with the intensity of a man memorizing faces for future retribution. Ginseng's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted into something Joyce couldn't read. "Your father just went into emergency surgery. Subdural hematoma. They're decompressing the bleed now." Ice crystallized in her veins. "Will he survive?" "They're saying 60-40 odds. Surgery takes 4 hours minimum." Ginseng met her eyes. "We don't have 4 hours. Duong's people know we have the key. They'll be fortifying the compound, possibly rigging it to collapse the moment we breach the cellar. We go in now, or we don't go in at all." "My father could die while I'm underground reading a dead man's diary." "Your father could die while you're doing nothing. At least this way, his death funds something meaningful." The brutality of it struck her like a fist, but he was right. Her father had raised her to finish what she started, to value truth over comfort, to understand that some prices were worth paying, even when the currency was blood. "How long until we reach the compound?" she asked. 18 minutes. Joyce closed her eyes. Somewhere in Geneva, surgeons were cutting into her father's skull. Somewhere behind them, Duong's army was regrouping, calling in reinforcements, preparing to turn a family estate into a kill box. Somewhere ahead, a metal box waited in the dark, holding answers that men had murdered to keep buried. She thought about her grandmother, not her blood grandmother, but the woman who'd taught her that language was archaeology, that every word was a fossil of intention, that the dead spoke loudest when the living finally learned to listen. "When we get there," she said quietly, "how do we get past 30 armed men?" Ginseng smiled. It wasn't comforting. "We don't get past them. We go through them. And we make enough noise that everyone in 3 provinces knows the Ga family is done hiding." The Range Rover accelerated into Gianju's industrial outskirts, where streetlights died and shadows grew teeth. Joyce checked her phone one last time. No updates from Geneva, just silence which was either mercy or prophecy. She tucked the phone away and started mentally preparing for what came next. Breaking into a fortified compound, decoding a linguistic puzzle under fire, and surviving long enough to learn which of the men in her life had been lying. The ledger would speak. The question was whether anyone would be alive to hear it. The compound looked like something from a crime thriller's opening credits. Sprawling traditional architecture gone to seed, wooden beams weathered to the color of old bones, rice paper windows torn and flapping in the wind like flags of surrender. It sat behind iron gates that had rusted into permanent half-open positions, as if the property itself had given up on keeping secrets. "They're already inside," Ginseng said, studying thermal imaging on a tablet. 12 signatures in the main house, 6 more scattered across the grounds. They're not hiding. They want us to know they're waiting. Joyce scanned the perimeter. "Where's the cellar entrance?" "Kitchen, eastern wing, which means walking through the center of their formation." Ginseng zoomed the thermal display. "They've set up a funnel. They'll let us enter, then collapse on us once we're committed." "So we don't take the bait." "We take it, but we bring our own trap." Ginseng made a series of hand signals to his team, who'd assembled in the tree line like ghosts in tactical gear. "Diversionary assault on the western entrance in 90 seconds. Creates chaos, pulls their numbers. We go in through the servants' quarters, old tunnels my grandmother used for smuggling during the occupation. Leads directly to the cellar." Joyce looked at him. "You've been planning this." "I've been planning for Duong to betray me since I was 16 years old. I just didn't know when." Ginseng checked his weapon. "My father told me once, trust is just patience waiting for confirmation. Duong's been confirming for 2 decades. I was just too loyal to read the data." "Loyalty isn't weakness." "It is when it's aimed at a snake." Ginseng nodded toward the compound. "Ready." Joyce's knee throbbed where she'd hit gravel in the cemetery. Her hands were shaking. She was a linguistics scholar, not a soldier. But her father was on an operating table in Geneva, and the only currency that mattered now was the truth locked in a metal box beneath this rotting estate. "Ready," she lied. The diversionary team struck with surgical precision. Flashbangs, suppressive fire, shouted commands designed to sound like a full assault. The compound erupted into chaos. Thermal signatures converged on the western side, exactly as Ginseng predicted. They moved through shadows, Joyce following Ginseng's footsteps exactly. The servants' entrance was hidden behind a false panel in the outer wall, the kind of architectural secret that survived generations because it was built by people who understood that the powerful always needed escape routes. The tunnel smelled like rot and history. Joyce's phone flashlight caught glimpses of stone walls carved with characters she recognized, Buddhist sutras, prayers for safe passage. Ginseng navigated by memory, each turn confident despite decades of absence. "My grandmother used to bring me down here when my father's associates visited," he said quietly. "She'd tell me stories while the adults negotiated upstairs, said the tunnels remembered everything the house wanted to forget." "What kind of stories?" "About tigers and snakes, about sons who inherited empires built on bones, about the cost of knowing too much." Ginseng paused at a junction, listening. Gunfire echoed distantly above them. "She told me my father was a good man in a bad business, that he tried to get out before the business got into him. I didn't believe her then." "Do you believe her now?" "I'm about to find out." The tunnel terminated at a wooden door so old it had fossilized. Ginseng applied pressure to specific points, some sequence he'd memorized, and it swung inward on hinges that whispered instead of screamed. The cellar was exactly as Joyce remembered from her grandmother's descriptions. Earthen floor, stone walls, wooden casks arranged in rows like sleeping soldiers. The air tasted like fermentation and secrets. Ginseng counted casks from the eastern wall, stopped at the 4th, and began rolling it aside. Behind it, a niche carved into stone. Inside, a metal box approximately the size of a briefcase, sealed with a lock that matched the brass key Ginseng pulled from his pocket. "Last chance," he said. "We open this and there's no going back. Whatever's inside changes everything." Joyce heard her father's voice in her memory, quoting some philosopher she'd forgotten. "The unexamined life isn't worth living, but the examined life costs everything." "Open it," she said. The key turned with a click that sounded like a bone breaking. The box exhaled stale air that smelled faintly of sandalwood. Inside, wrapped in silk so old it disintegrated at touch, lay a micro-cassette recorder and 3 handwritten journals. Ginseng lifted the recorder like it might detonate. His hands, steady through firefights and interrogations, trembled now. "This is his handwriting," he said, touching the journals. "My father's. I haven't seen it in 15 years. Joyce recognized the linguistic code immediately. Mixed script, Korean base with classical Chinese grammatical structures, exactly as her mentor had taught her. "It's encoded. I'll need time to translate." "We don't have time." Ginseng pressed play on the recorder. Static, then a voice, male, Korean accented, speaking English with the careful precision of someone recording testimony. "My name is Ga Di-young. If you are hearing this, I am dead. If my mother kept her promise, you are my son, and you are hearing this with the help of a stranger who speaks the old dialect. Trust her. She is the only person alive who cannot be compromised by my organization." Ginseng's face went absolutely still. The recording continued. "I am recording this on March 14th, 2010. In 3 days, I am scheduled to meet with the commission to propose dissolving our family's involvement in the organization. I will offer full financial transition, leadership succession, and my silence regarding operations. I have arranged new identities for you and your mother in New Zealand. We will leave this life behind." Joyce watched Ginseng's world disassemble in real time. "I do not expect to survive the meeting. My second-in-command, Duong, has been consolidating power for years. He views my departure as weakness, my conscience as liability. He has made alliances with factions that profit from my ruthlessness but would never tolerate my redemption. I believe he will kill me before I can complete the transition. I believe he will make it look like external aggression to justify seizing control and eliminating anyone who questions his authority." Ginseng's breathing had gone shallow. "If I am right, he will tell you I died in a Yakuza ambush. He will show you photographs of bodies. He will organize a funeral that draws hundreds. He will position himself as your protector, your mentor, your loyal family servant. He will spend years earning your absolute trust, molding you into the weapon I refuse to be, preparing you to take blame for crimes he commits in our family name." The voice paused. In the background, faint music played, something classical piano. "Son, if you are hearing this, Duong has succeeded in fooling you. Forgive yourself for believing him. I believed him for 20 years. He is extraordinary at deception. It is his singular talent." Joyce glanced at Ginseng. Tears tracked down his face, silent, unstoppable. "The journals contain evidence. Names, dates, financial records of Duong's parallel operations. Money laundering, weapons trafficking, contract killings commissioned without commission approval. He has been building a splinter organization inside ours, waiting for the moment to execute a coup. My death is his catalyst. Your inheritance is his opportunity. He will use you, betray you, and discard you the moment you become inconvenient." The recording crackled. "The woman helping you, if she is who my mother promised, has no loyalty to our world. She wants only to save her father, pay her, protect her. She is the only ally you can trust because she is the only person who doesn't want your throne." Joyce felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders like a crown made of thorns. "To my son, I am sorry I brought you into this life. Sorry I waited too long to escape it. Sorry you will inherit my failures instead of my hopes. But you are stronger than I was. Smarter. And now, finally, you know the truth. What you do with it will define whether the Ga family name dies with honor or lives with shame." The piano music swelled. "I love you. I have always loved you. Forgive me for leaving you with this burden." The recording ended. Ginseng sat in the dirt, the recorder cradled in his hands like something holy. His eyes were red but dry now, past tears into some territory Joyce couldn't name. 15 years, he whispered. "I've spent 15 years avenging the wrong man, building an empire for my father's murderer, becoming exactly what Duong needed me to be." "You didn't know," Joyce said. "I should have known. My grandmother tried to tell me, in small ways, subtle warnings I dismissed as grief or senility, and he killed her for it, burned her alive to close the last loose end." Ginseng looked at Joyce. Your mentor, my grandmother, they set this in motion years ago. Why? Why trust a stranger with this? Because family was the weapon, Joyce said quietly. Duong used your loyalty as a leash. Your grandmother needed someone outside that dynamic, someone who couldn't be bought or threatened or manipulated through blood ties. So she chose you, a student she barely knew. She chose someone desperate enough to be reliable. My father's medical bills made me predictable. I needed money. She needed a courier. It was transactional. Joyce paused. But she also taught me. Spent 6 months passing on a dying dialect when she could have just hired a translator. I think she wanted someone to remember her as more than a crime boss's mother. Someone who'd carry her language forward when everything else burned. Ginseng picked up the journals. Can you read these? Given time, yes. But the recording gave us the key points. Duong's crimes, your father's innocence, the framework of the betrayal. I need specifics, names, dates, evidence the commission can't dispute. Ginseng's voice had gone cold, professional. The grief was still there, but he'd locked it in a room he'd deal with later. How long? For a full translation. Days, for enough to build a case. Hours if I focus on the financial sections. Gunfire erupted above them, closer now, inside the house. Ginseng stood. They've broken through our perimeter. We're out of time. Then we leave, take the evidence and run. Run where? Duong has resources across 3 continents. He'll hunt us until we're both dead and these journals are ash. Ginseng checked his weapon. No, we finish this tonight. I call an emergency commission session. Present the evidence. Force them to choose between Duong and the truth. They're his allies. They'll kill you before they admit they were complicit. Some of them, maybe, but not all. My father had loyalists, men who respected his attempts at reform. If I can reach them, if I can present irrefutable proof. An explosion shook the ceiling. Dust rained down in ghostly curtains. Basement's compromised. Ginseng grabbed the box. We're leaving through the north tunnel, now. They ran through passages that smelled like the grave, Joyce clutching the journals while Ginseng navigated by instinct. Behind them, voices shouted in Korean, coordinated, military, closing fast. They emerged into the night near an old well, camouflaged by overgrowth. Ginseng's remaining security team materialized from the shadows, forming a protective cordon. Vehicles 30 meters north, one reported, but they've got the access road blocked. Then we go cross-country. Ginseng looked at Joyce. Can you run? Her knee was screaming. Her lungs burned. But her father was in surgery, and the truth was in her arms, and running was the only option left. Lead the way, she said. They disappeared into Gianju's urban wilderness, a linguistics scholar and a crime lord, carrying a dead man's confession toward a reckoning 15 years overdue. Behind them, the compound burned. Duong's men had torched it, erasing the physical evidence. But the ledger was already gone, and the truth was airborne. The docks smelled like diesel and low tide, that particular ocean rot that comes from things dying slowly in salt water. Ginseng had chosen the location strategically, open sightlines, multiple exit routes, and enough ambient industrial noise to muffle gunfire. The commission meeting was scheduled for dawn, 3 hours away, in a warehouse on the eastern pier. Until then, they needed to stay alive. Joyce sat in the back of a refrigerated fish truck that reeked of mackerel and desperation, translating her father's journals by the light of her phone. Her knee had swollen to the size of a grapefruit. Ginseng's medic had wrapped it in compression bandaging that felt like a tourniquet, but the pain was useful. It kept her focused. This section details a meeting from January 2010, she said, highlighting characters with her finger. Duong proposed expanding into human trafficking. Your father vetoed it. Duong argued that traditional revenue streams were drying up, that diversification was survival. Your father said some lines couldn't be crossed without becoming monsters. Ginseng listened without expression. He'd gone somewhere distant since hearing his father's voice, some interior landscape where grief and rage were alloying into something cold and weaponizable. 2 months later, your father is dead, Joyce continued. Duong assumes control. Within 6 months, the organization's human trafficking revenue increases 400%. It's all documented here: routes, payoffs, body counts. The commission knew, Ginseng said quietly. They had to know. Some of them profited directly. Your father lists names, percentages. These aren't just criminal associates. These are men who attend charity galas and donate to children's hospitals. Joyce closed the journal, her academic detachment finally cracking. They built an empire on selling people like livestock. And they'll protect that empire with everything they have. Ginseng checked his watch. Which is why we need leverage beyond the journals, physical proof the commission can't dismiss as forgeries. The recording can be faked, deep-faked, discredited. We need corroborating witnesses, financial records from external sources, something irrefutable. Joyce's phone buzzed. Geneva, her hands shook as she answered. Miss Pearsley. The surgeon's voice carried that particular professional gentleness doctors use when delivering verdicts. Your father survived the surgery. We've successfully decompressed the hematoma. He's stable. The relief hit like a physical blow. Joyce couldn't speak. However, the surgeon continued, he's developed complications. Cerebral edema. We're managing it with medication, but the next 72 hours are critical. He needs to remain under intensive observation. He'll have it, Joyce managed. Whatever he needs, the money's been transferred. Received in full. Miss Pearsley, your father is receiving the best possible care. Now you need to take care of yourself. You sound. I'm fine, thank you. Please keep me updated. She ended the call before the surgeon could ask questions she couldn't answer. Like why she sounded out of breath. Why there was gunfire in the background during their last conversation. Why a linguistics scholar was coordinating international medical care from a Korean fish truck at 3 a.m. He made it, Ginseng asked. He made it, Joyce wiped her eyes. He's fighting, so I keep fighting. Good, because we're about to. Ginseng stopped. His security chief was signaling from outside the truck, urgent hand gestures that made Ginseng's expression go flat. What? Joyce asked. Duong, he's here. They exited the truck into sodium vapor darkness. The security team had formed a defensive perimeter, weapons drawn, thermal scopes, scanning the maze of shipping containers and loading equipment. Joyce couldn't see anything except shadows and the occasional seagull wheeling through artificial light. Where? Ginseng asked. Everywhere. The security chief pointed to thermal readings on his tablet. 30+ signatures. They've surrounded the entire dock complex. We're boxed in. Ginseng studied the display. They're not attacking. No, sir. They're waiting. For what? A voice amplified through a bullhorn answered the question. For you to realize you've lost. Duong emerged from between two containers, flanked by a dozen armed men who moved with the coordination of military contractors. He'd changed from his expensive suit into tactical gear that made him look simultaneously more honest and more dangerous. The wire-rimmed glasses were gone, revealing eyes that held all the warmth of industrial refrigeration. Ginseng, he called out. We need to talk. Send the woman out. This is family business. You stopped being family when you murdered my father, Ginseng shouted back. Your father was weak. He chose sentiment over survival. I saved this organization from his naivety. Duong took 3 steps forward, hands visible, weaponless. I raised you, trained you, made you into something he never had the spine to be. You owe me everything. I owe you a bullet. Perhaps, but not tonight. Tonight, you're going to walk away. Leave the journals, leave the recording, leave the woman. Walk away and I'll let you live. You can disappear. New identity, new country. I'll even fund it, call it severance pay for decades of loyal service. Joyce watched Ginseng's face. He's stalling. I know, Ginseng said quietly. The commission meeting. He needs to delay us until his allies can consolidate. If we don't make that meeting, our evidence becomes irrelevant. So what do? We call his bluff. Ginseng raised his voice. Duong, you want to negotiate. Come closer, just you, no weapons. Let's talk like civilized men. Duong smiled. Do you think I'm stupid? I think you're confident, probably overconfident. You've surrounded us, outnumbered us, and you assume we're desperate. Ginseng paused. But I'm curious, why offer me exile? Why not just kill me and take the evidence? Because you're still useful. Your name carries weight with the old guard. I can use that. Du-seung took another step. And because, despite everything, I did raise you, some part of me still sees you as a weapon you're reluctant to discard, Joyce interrupted. He doesn't care about you. He cares about the resources you represent. The moment you stop being useful, you're dead. Du-seung's attention shifted to her. The waitress speaks. Tell me, Miss Pearsley, do you understand what you've walked into? This isn't an academic exercise. These are men who have built empires on violence. You're a translator, a scholar. You don't belong in this world. Neither did your grandmother, Joyce said, but she managed to outthink you for 30 years, hid evidence you never found, trained a replacement you never suspected, died protecting secrets that are about to destroy you. She smiled. So maybe the problem isn't that I don't belong here. Maybe it's that you've spent so long surrounded by killers, you forgot how dangerous knowledge can be. Du-seung's face tightened. Last chance, Ginseng, walk away. Ginseng's response was to raise his weapon. The standoff crystallized, two men who'd spent decades as mentor and student, now separated by a father's ghost and a ledger full of truth. Around them, 30 guns waited for permission to speak. I'm disappointed, Du-seung said. I taught you better then. The shipping container behind Du-seung exploded. Not literally exploded, but the doors blew open and men poured out. Not Du-seung's men. Different uniforms. Korean National Police, backed by Interpol agents in tactical gear. Du-seung spun, confusion breaking through his composure for the first time. You were wondering why I chose the docks, Ginseng said. It's because I've been negotiating with the authorities for the past 6 hours. Immunity in exchange for evidence against the commission. Full testimony. Names, dates, operations. Everything my father documented, plus everything I've witnessed over 15 years. Du-seung's face went ashen. You betrayed your own organization. I betrayed an organization that murdered my father and built itself on human suffering. There's a difference. Ginseng gestured to the police. They've been listening to this entire conversation. Your confession regarding my father's weakness. Your admission of taking control. Your attempt to bribe a witness. It's all recorded. Du-seung reached for something. A weapon, a phone, some contingency he'd prepared for scenarios exactly like this. Joyce's hand shot out, grabbing Ginseng's arm. Wait, don't let him. Du-seung pulled a detonator. You think I came unprepared? He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd already made peace with apocalypse. I have charges planted throughout this facility, enough C4 to level 3 city blocks. You want truth? We'll all burn with it. The police froze. Ginseng's security team went rigid. Joyce felt her mind race through probabilities. Du-seung was a strategist, not a fanatic. He wanted power, not martyrdom. The detonator was a bluff. It had to be. Except his finger was already on the trigger, and his eyes held the empty certainty of someone who'd run out of moves. Lower your weapons, Du-seung said calmly. All of you. Or I press this button, and we become a news story about industrial accidents and tragic losses. The police began lowering weapons. Ginseng's jaw clenched. And Joyce smiled. What's funny? Du-seung snapped. You are. Joyce limped forward, ignoring the screaming in her knee. You're supposed to be this brilliant tactician, this master manipulator, but you just made the stupidest mistake of your life. Enlighten me. You assumed I was just a translator, that my only value was decoding journals. Joyce pulled her phone out, screen facing Du-seung. But I'm a linguist. I study how people communicate, including nonverbal communication, including tactical radio chatter. Du-seung's expression shifted. Your men have been broadcasting on an open frequency for the past 20 minutes, Joyce continued. I've been listening. Want to know what I learned? There are no explosives. You're bluffing. That detonator is connected to nothing but your desperation. You're lying. Am I? Joyce looked at the police. Check the frequency, 462.7 megahertz. Listen to his men discussing how the fake charges are positioned, how the detonator is just for show, how the plan is to use the threat to create chaos and escape in the confusion. One of the Interpol agents checked. His face confirmed everything. Duong hand tightened on the detonator. For a moment, Joyce thought he might press it anyway, call her bluff, test her certainty, die to prove some final point. Instead, he laughed, a sound like glass breaking in an empty room. Clever, he said. The waitress wins, how appropriate. He dropped the detonator. The police moved in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Duong didn't resist. He just stood there, hands raised, watching Ginseng with something that might have been pride or might have been contempt. You'll never be free of this, he said as they cuffed him. You can burn the organization, testify against the commission, start over in some fantasy of legitimacy. But you're your father's son. Violence is your inheritance. One day you'll wake up and realize you've become exactly what I made you. Ginseng said nothing, just watched as they led Duong away, 15 years of lies finally collapsing into handcuffs and Miranda rights. Joyce's phone buzzed. Geneva again. Miss Pearsley, your father's awake. He's asking for you. She closed her eyes, felt the weight of the night drain away, replaced by something lighter. Hope, maybe, or just the absence of immediate death. Tell him I'm coming home, she said. Tell him I finished the translation. She looked at Ginseng. He was staring at the spot where Duong had stood, his face unreadable. You okay? She asked. I don't know what I am. Ginseng turned to her. But thanks to you, I get to find out. The sun was rising over Gianju's harbor, turning the ocean from black to gray to something almost hopeful. And somewhere in the journals, still clutched in Joyce's hands, a dead man's final words waited to reshape an empire. The warehouse district sprawled like a concrete labyrinth, abandoned buildings that had once moved Samsung electronics and Hyundai parts, now reduced to rust and graffiti. Joyce pressed against corrugated metal that radiated cold through her jacket, her breath coming in visible bursts. Somewhere in the darkness, footsteps echoed. Duong's remaining loyalists, hunting for stragglers after the harbor arrest. Ginseng had gone with the police to formalize his testimony. His security team had scattered to defensive positions across the port, which left Joyce with exactly one ally, a 12-year-old street kid named Aki who'd been running lookout operations for Ginseng's organization since he was old enough to ride a bicycle. Miss Joyce, Aki's whisper crackled through the cheap walkie-talkie Ginseng had pressed into her hand before leaving. They're sweeping Building 7. You need to move. Joyce consulted the mental map she'd been building. Building 7 was 2 structures away, maybe 3 minutes if they were thorough. Where do I go? Building 12, the fish processing plant. It's got multiple exits and the floor plan is chaos. You can lose them there. How do I get there without being seen? A pause, then, you trust me. Joyce looked at the walkie-talkie like it might offer better options. It didn't. Do I have a choice? Not really. Okay, listen. I'm watching on thermal from the roof of Building 9. I can see them and I can see you. I'll guide you turn by turn, but you have to do exactly what I say. No hesitation. Aki, you're 12. I'm 12 and I've been navigating this port since I was 8. You're a waitress who speaks dead languages. We're both out of our depth, so let's help each other. Fair point. Joyce adjusted her grip on the journals tucked under her jacket. What's first? Run north, 50 meters. There's a gap between buildings 4 and 5. When I say stop, you stop. When I say move, you move. Got it? Got it. Go. Joyce ran. Her knee protested with every impact, sending lightning bolts of pain up her leg. The gap appeared exactly where Aki promised, a narrow alley thick with the smell of machine oil and decay. Stop, Aki said. 3 men just rounded the corner behind you. They're searching the perimeter. Hold position. Joyce pressed herself into shadow, controlling her breathing the way her mentor had taught her during meditation exercises. In through the nose, out through the mouth, become furniture, become wallpaper. Flashlight beams swept the alley entrance. Voices in Korean discussing search patterns and coverage zones. One of them laughed at something crude. They were professional, but they weren't expecting real resistance. Duong was in custody. The primary target had escaped. This was cleanup. "They're moving past," Aki whispered. "Wait for my signal." The flashlights receded. Joyce counted to 10, then 20. "Now, straight through the alley. Exit onto the cargo loading area. There's a forklift on the east side. Hide behind it." Joyce moved, her limp more pronounced now. The journals felt like lead weight. She reached the forklift and collapsed behind its rusted bulk, gasping. "You're doing great," Aki said, and his voice carried genuine encouragement. "But we've got a problem. 2 more teams just entered the search grid. They're boxing you in. I need to get creative." "What does creative mean?" "It means I'm going to make noise to draw them away. When you hear me yell, you run for building 12. Don't stop. Don't look back, just run." "Aki, they have guns. You're a child." "I'm fast and small and I know places they don't. I'll be fine." A pause. "Miss Joyce, my older brother is sick, needs medicine we can't afford. Mr. Ga promised me money if I helped you. Is he going to keep that promise?" Joyce felt her throat tighten. "He will. I'll make sure of it." "Then I'm helping you. Get ready." 30 seconds later, Aki's voice erupted from somewhere to the west. "Hey, over here, I see her. Building 6. The searchers converged on the sound like sharks to blood. Joyce bolted for building 12, ignoring the screaming in her knee, ignoring the stitch in her side. The fish processing plant's entrance gaped like a mouth, doors torn off by scavengers, interior black as a throat. She plunged inside. The smell hit first, old fish guts, industrial cleaner mold that had been growing since the 90s. Her phone flashlight caught glimpses of gutting tables, conveyor belts frozen in rust, and hooks hanging from ceiling chains like some slaughterhouse nightmare. "Aki," she whispered into the walkie-talkie. "I'm inside. Are you okay?" Static, then. "I'm fine. Lost them in the container stacks. But listen, you've got company incoming. 4 men heading for building 12. They know you're in there." Joyce's chest tightened. "Exits." 3, north loading dock, south personnel door, and an emergency hatch on the roof. But they'll cover all of them. You're trapped. "Then what do I do?" Silence. Joyce could hear Aki thinking, could imagine him on some rooftop, a child playing tactical chess with men who killed for a living. "Miss Joyce, can you still speak that old Korean dialect, the one you used on Mr. Ga?" "Yes, why?" "Because I have an idea, but it's weird." "Weird how?" "You know Morse code." Joyce blinked. From a college linguistics class, yes, why would? "I learned it from YouTube, been practicing because I thought it was cool." Aki's voice accelerated with excitement. "Those men, they're listening for English or Korean. But what if we communicate in something they can't understand? I guide you through the building using Morse. You tap responses. They'll hear tapping, but they won't know its language." "That's actually brilliant." "I know, right? Okay, I'm switching to taps. 1 tap is yes, 2 taps is no, 3 taps is repeat. I'll guide you to the north exit. It's the farthest from their entry point. Ready." "Ready." The walkie-talkie went silent. Then tap, 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 stop. MOV. Joyce moved deeper into the processing plant, navigating by phone light. Behind her, voices echoed as the searchers entered. Flashlights swept the darkness. Tap, 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 stop. LEFT. She turned left, nearly tripping over a fallen conveyor belt. Her phone light caught something scrawled on the wall in faded paint. Red Moon! The same symbol she'd seen in her father's journals, a code phrase his grandmother had mentioned. More taps. Tap, 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 stop. HID. Joyce killed her phone light and pressed herself into a gap between 2 gutting tables. 20 feet away, a flashlight beam swept past. The searcher was young, maybe mid-20s, holding his weapon like someone who'd watched too many movies. He stopped, turned, aimed his flashlight directly at her hiding spot. Joyce's heart stopped beating. The walkie-talkie in her pocket tapped again. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 tap. Stop. WHISTL. What? Joyce's mind raced. Then she understood. He wanted her to make noise, to draw the searcher closer so. A sound erupted from outside. Not a whistle. An air horn. Loud, obnoxious, clearly coming from a different building. The searcher spun toward it. Over there, she's outside. He ran. His partners followed. Within seconds, Joyce was alone in the darkness. "Aki," she whispered into the radio. "That was you." "Found an old boat horn in Building 9. Figured it'd work." His voice carried pride. "Now move, north exit, 30 meters straight ahead." Joyce ran through darkness, hands outstretched, phone light guiding her path. The north loading dock appeared, a massive opening where trucks had once backed up to receive processed fish. Freedom was 15 feet away. She heard the click behind her before she saw the gun. "Don't move." Joyce froze. A woman's voice, Korean accented, carrying the flat affect of someone who'd done this too many times to feel anything about it. "The journals," slowly. Joyce's mind raced through options. Fight, she'd lose. Run, she'd get shot. Comply, she'd die anyway. "Miss Joyce," Aki's voice crackled through the radio. "I can't see inside. What's happening?" The woman stepped closer. "Who are you talking to?" "A child," Joyce said. "A 12-year-old lookout who's been helping me navigate. He has nothing to do with this." "Tell him to come down, or I shoot you and find him myself." Joyce felt her options collapse into a single point. She brought the radio to her lips. "Aki, I need you to do something." "What?" "Remember that dialect I spoke? The one from Mr. Ga's grandmother?" Joyce shifted into the archaic Gialotto variant, knowing the woman behind her wouldn't understand the regional specifics. "I need you to run. Don't look back. Don't try to help. Just run and find Mr. Ga. Tell him the Red Moon Code is active. Tell him Joyce says the ledger is insurance, not evidence. He'll understand." "I don't understand Korean," Aki said. "You don't need to, just remember the sounds. Repeat them exactly to Mr. Ga." Joyce continued speaking, weaving actual instructions into nonsense syllables, creating a code within a code. "The woman behind me thinks I'm giving up. She doesn't know I'm counting. When I reach 0 in the old tongue, I'm dropping to the ground. Whatever happens next, you keep that radio recording running. It's evidence." "Miss Joyce." 3, Joyce said in Gialotto dialect. 2. "What are you saying?" The woman's voice carried edge now. 1. Joyce dropped. The gun fired, bullet passing through the space her head had occupied. She rolled, journals scattering, and her phone light caught the woman's face in strobe horror. Then Aki's voice erupted through the radio, screaming in English. "Police! Building 12! Officer needs assistance." The woman spun toward the sound, confused, trying to locate the source. Joyce kicked out, connecting with the woman's knee. The same move that had been done to her in the cemetery, except this time Joyce was the weapon. The woman collapsed, gun clattering away. Joyce grabbed it, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. "Don't move. I don't know how to use this, which makes me unpredictable." The woman assessed her, then smiled. "You won't shoot." "You're probably right, but the police heading this way definitely will." Joyce gestured to the radio, where Aki was still yelling about officers down and suspects armed. "That's being broadcast on emergency channels. Real police will be here in minutes. You can wait for them, or you can run." The woman chose survival. She ran. Joyce collapsed against a gutting table, adrenaline draining away, leaving only exhaustion and pain. She gathered the scattered journals with shaking hands. "Aki," her voice cracked. "You still there?" "I'm here. Are you okay?" "I'm alive. That counts as okay." Joyce limped toward the exit. "How did you know to broadcast on emergency channels?" "I didn't. I just yelled into the radio and hoped it sounded real." "You saved my life by pretending to call for help." "I saved your life by understanding that sometimes the best weapon is just being really, really loud." Aki paused. "Miss Joyce, what's the Red Moon Code?" Joyce looked at the graffiti on the wall, then at the journals. Her father had written about it, a contingency plan his grandmother had established. A signal that meant the primary operation had failed and secondary protocols were active. "It means," Joyce said slowly, "that even if the ledger is destroyed, there's another record, another witness, another way to ensure the truth survives." "Where?" Joyce smiled, remembering her mentor's final lessons. "Everywhere. Your grandmother didn't trust single points of failure. She distributed the truth across languages, locations, and people. The ledger was never the only copy. It was just the most obvious one." Which meant Duong had already lost, even if he destroyed every physical piece of evidence. Because the truth was viral now, distributed, immortal. And Joyce Pearsley, waitress and scholar, had just become its primary carrier. The commission chamber sat above a legitimate import-export business in downtown Seoul, hidden behind frosted glass doors marked Executive Conference Room. Joyce had imagined something cinematic, dark wood paneling, cigar smoke, men in suits discussing murder over scotch. Instead, it looked like any corporate boardroom. Ergonomic chairs, video conferencing equipment, a coffee station with artisanal pods. Except everyone here had killed people. Ginseng sat at the head of the table, 13 commission members arranged in judgment around him. Duong occupied a chair near the center despite being technically in police custody. His lawyers had arranged a temporary release for family business, which apparently superseded international arrest warrants when enough money changed hands. Joyce watched from a side room through one-way glass, a key beside her, both of them escorted by Interpol agents who'd made it clear they were observers, not participants. This was internal organizational politics. The police could arrest whoever walked out, but they couldn't influence who walked out alive. "Mr. Ga," the eldest commissioner began, a man named Beek whose hands were liver-spotted but steady. "You've requested this emergency session. You have the floor." Ginseng stood. He'd changed into a black suit that made him look like a eulogy. 15 years ago, my father was murdered. You were told it was Yakuza aggression. You were shown photographs of bodies, funeral receipts, witness testimony. You accepted this narrative because it was convenient, because it allowed business to continue without disruption. Murmurs around the table. Duong remained impassive. "I'm here to present evidence that my father's death was orchestrated by someone in this room. That the past 15 years of leadership have been built on fratricide and deception. That every decision made, every operation approved, every profit distributed has been tainted by this foundational lie." Beek's expression didn't change. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Ga. I assume you have proof." Ginseng placed a folder on the table. "Complete documentation, financial records, witness testimony, a recording of my father nomming his killer hours before his death." Duong finally spoke, his voice carrying the patience of a professor correcting a slow student. "The commission is aware that Mr. Ga has been under significant stress. His recent partnership with law enforcement suggests emotional instability. Perhaps we should postpone this session until he's had time to." "I'm not unstable. I'm informed." Ginseng opened the folder. "My father kept journals, encrypted in a linguistic code only one person alive could translate. That person is currently in the observation room, having survived multiple assassination attempts orchestrated by the man who killed my father." Every head turned toward the one-way glass. Joyce felt their attention like radiation. "The translator," Ginseng continued, "has decoded my father's final testimony. Would the commission like to hear it?" Beek glanced at Duong, then back to Ginseng. "We would." Ginseng pressed play on a recorder. His father's voice filled the room, that same testimony Joyce had heard in the cellar, nomming Duong, detailing betrayals, predicting his own murder with the precision of someone who'd already accepted the inevitable. The recording played for 8 minutes. Nobody spoke. Duong's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Joyce noticed his left hand had curled into a fist beneath the table. When it ended, silence settled like fallout. "Compelling theater," Duong said finally. But audio can be fabricated. Voice synthesis technology has advanced considerably. For all we know, Mr. Ga created this recording himself using AI software and his father's old speeches. The journals corroborate every detail, Ginseng said. Written documents can also be forged. You've had 15 years to create this elaborate fiction. Duong looked at the commission. Consider what he's actually presenting. A recording with no chain of custody, documents that conveniently support his narrative, and the testimony of a waitress nobody had heard of until 3 days ago. This is grieving son fantasizing about conspiracy because he can't accept that his father died in mundane gang violence. Several commissioners nodded. Joyce felt her stomach tighten. Beak raised a hand. Mr. Ga, do you have any evidence beyond the recording and journals? Independent verification. Ginseng met Joyce's eyes through the glass. This was the moment they'd prepared for. The reason she'd spent 18 straight hours translating not just the journals, but cross-referencing them with external databases, financial records, shipping manifests. I have, Ginseng said, testimony from 6 separate witnesses who worked in Duong's parallel operation. People he thought were loyal, who have agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. I have bank records showing Duong skimming 15% of organizational profits into offshore accounts since 2010. I have communications between Duong and Yakuza leadership, showing he arranged my father's death and staged it as inter-organizational conflict. Duong's composure cracked, just slightly, a tightness around his eyes. And I have, Ginseng continued, pulling a second folder from his briefcase, emails between Duong and 3 members of this commission, detailing profit-sharing agreements for operations my father explicitly vetoed. Human trafficking, organ trade, contracts so morally bankrupt they would destroy this organization's remaining credibility if made public. He slid the folder to Beak. The translator found references to these agreements in my father's journals. We traced the financial threads. Your names are in this documentation. 3 commissioners went pale. Duong's fist tightened until his knuckles cracked. Beak opened the folder. Read. His expression calcified into something that could break stone. He looked at the 3 commissioners Ginseng had implicated. Is this accurate? One of them, a younger man named Yoon, stood abruptly. This is a setup. Duong, tell them this is fabricated. Duong said nothing. Tell them, Yoon's voice pitched toward panic. Sit down, Beak said quietly. The command carried absolute authority. Yoon sat. Beak closed the folder. Mr. Ga, your evidence is comprehensive. However, there's a procedural issue. You've been cooperating with law enforcement. You've agreed to testify against this organization in exchange for immunity. That makes you, by definition, a traitor. Ginseng didn't flinch. My father tried to leave this life honorably. He was murdered for it. I'm finishing what he started. If that's treason, I accept the label. Acceptance doesn't prevent consequences. Beak gestured to the guards stationed at the doors, men who'd been invisible until this moment. The commission's position has always been clear. Cooperation with authorities is punishable by death. Your evidence against Duong is compelling, but your betrayal of the organization is factual. We must vote on your fate first. Joyce felt ice crystallize in her chest. They were going to kill him. The evidence didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. Organizational rules superseded everything, even justice. Wait, she said into the microphone, connecting the observation room to the boardroom. Her voice echoed through speakers, making 13 heads turn. Before you vote, there's something you should know. Beak frowned. The translator has no standing in commission proceedings. The translator, Joyce said, has been recording this entire meeting, audio and video. It's being live-streamed to 3 separate law enforcement agencies and 2 journalists. If Ginseng dies in this room, the world will know within minutes. Your names, faces, and voices admitting to organizational murder will be headline news by evening. Silence. Then Duong laughed, a sound like ice cracking. She's bluffing. There's no signal in this room. We have jammers. Joyce pulled out her phone, showing the screen to the camera she knew was hidden in the observation room's ceiling. Your jammers block cellular and Wi-Fi. They don't block hardwired connections. The Interpol agents escorting me ran a fiber optic cable from this building to their van parked 3 blocks away. Everything said in this room for the past 20 minutes is documented and distributed. She watched the commissioners' faces shift through calculation. Some looked angry, others looked resigned. Yoon looked like he might vomit. Beek's expression remained unreadable. You're claiming to have outsmarted our security measures. I'm claiming that I'm a linguist who studies communication systems. Your security focuses on weapons and physical threats. Nobody thought to check for someone exploiting your infrastructure's blind spots. Joyce paused. Ginseng chose truth over loyalty. I suggest you choose survival over pride. Because if he dies, you all go to prison. If he lives, you have the option of negotiating your own immunity deals. Du-seung stood abruptly. This is absurd. The commission doesn't negotiate with. Sit down, Beek said. This time the command was for Du-seung. Du-seung remained standing. You're going to let a waitress dictate terms. I'm going to prevent this organization from collapsing into public scandal. Beek looked at Ginseng. Your father wanted to leave honorably. You're forcing us out at gunpoint. Different methods, same result. The result, Ginseng said, is that human trafficking ends. Organ trade ends. The operations my father died opposing get shut down. The organization either reforms or dissolves. Those are the only options. And if we choose dissolution, then you coordinate it peacefully, distribute assets, and retire into legitimate business ventures. Or you fight, and law enforcement dismantles you violently using the evidence I've already provided. Beek studied him for a long moment. You've become your father after all, idealistic, naive, willing to burn everything for principle. He smiled without warmth. He died for those principles. Are you prepared to do the same? If necessary. It won't be necessary, Joyce interrupted. Because you're going to vote to accept Ginseng's terms, you're going to remove Du-seung from all positions of authority, and you're going to cooperate with the reform process. Because the alternative is that every person in this room spends the rest of their lives in prison. Beek turned to face the observation room glass. You're very confident for someone who has no power here. I have the only power that matters, Joyce said. I have the truth, and I have the means to distribute it. You can kill Ginseng, you can kill me, but you can't kill information that's already viral. The old man's eyes narrowed. Red Moon Protocol. Joyce felt her breath catch. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd been in the organization when Ginseng's grandmother established the contingency codes. Yes, she said. Red Moon Protocol. Multiple copies, multiple locations, multiple carriers. The ledger was never singular. It was a distributed system designed to survive exactly this scenario. Du-seung's face had gone ashen. You're lying. I destroyed every copy. I had people searching for 30 years. You had people searching for physical documents, Joyce corrected. But information doesn't live in paper anymore. It lives in digital distribution, encrypted backups, and human memory. Ginseng's grandmother understood that. She didn't hide one ledger. She created a network of witnesses, each with pieces of the truth, each programmed to activate if the primary carrier was compromised. She was bluffing, partially. The grandmother had mentioned something about distributed records, but Joyce didn't actually know the full extent of the system. She was gambling that her confidence would sell the deception. Beek was silent for 30 seconds. Then, motion to vote. Do we accept Mr. Ga's terms and initiate organizational reform? Or do we maintain current leadership and face law enforcement intervention? This is madness, Du-seung said. You're letting a child and a waitress dismantle decades of. All in favor of accepting terms. 9 hands rose, including Beek's. Du-seung stared at the raised hands like they were weapons pointed at his chest. You're all cowards. We're pragmatists, Beek said. Unlike you, we recognize when we've lost. He turned to Ginseng. You have 6 months to implement reforms. If you fail, if law enforcement moves against us despite cooperation, we will hold you personally responsible. Clear. Clear. Then this session is adjourned. Beek stood. Mr. Duong, you're removed from all organizational positions effective immediately. Your assets are frozen pending investigation. You'll surrender to authorities within 24 hours, or we'll deliver you ourselves. Duong looked at Ginseng with eyes that promised elaborate revenge. This isn't over. Yes, Ginseng said quietly, it is. Guards escorted Duong out. The other commissioners filed away, some shooting glances at the observation room glass, calculating, respectful, resentful. Within minutes, the boardroom was empty except for Ginseng. Joyce emerged from the observation room, a key trailing behind her. Her knee had gone from throbbing to numb, which was probably worse. Aki looked shell-shocked, a kid who just watched adults playing games with existential stakes. Ginseng turned to face them. You were bluffing about the distributed ledger. 70% bluffing, Joyce admitted. Your grandmother mentioned something about backup witnesses, but I don't actually know who they are or what they know. But they believed you. They believed I was confident enough to stake my life on it. Sometimes that's more convincing than proof. Joyce handed him the journals. It's over. You won. Ginseng looked at the documents like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I didn't win. I just survived long enough to tell the truth. That's not the same thing. It's close enough. Her phone buzzed. Geneva, Joyce's hands shook as she answered. Miss Pearsley, your father is awake and stable. Full cognitive function restored. He's asking when you're coming home. Joyce closed her eyes, felt tears track down her face despite every instinct to remain professional. Tell him soon. Tell him I love him. Tell him it's finished. She ended the call and looked at Ginseng. My father's alive. The surgery worked. Then you're free to go. The money's already transferred. You fulfilled your end of our agreement. What about you? What happens now? Ginseng walked to the window, looking out over Seoul's sprawling cityscape. I dismantle an empire, coordinate with authorities, try to build something legitimate from the wreckage, probably fail, definitely make enemies. He turned back to her. But at least I'll fail honestly. Aki tugged Joyce's sleeve. Miss Joyce, Mr. Ga promised me money for my brother's medicine. Ginseng pulled out his phone, typed briefly. Transferred, plus a scholarship fund. You're smart, Aki. Don't waste it on this life. The boy's eyes went wide. How much? Enough for medical school if you want it, or engineering, or whatever future you choose that doesn't involve bullets and betrayal. Ginseng looked at Joyce. He saved your life. That's worth investment. Joyce knelt to Aki's level, ignoring the screaming in her knee. You were braver than any adult in this building. Don't forget that. Aki nodded, suddenly shy. Then he ran, a 12-year-old who'd just been given a future fleeing before anyone could take it back. Joyce stood, facing Ginseng one last time. Your grandmother would be proud. My grandmother would say I took too long to see what was obvious. Ginseng extended his hand. Thank you, Miss Pearsley, for speaking the language of ghosts, for surviving long enough to translate them, for being exactly what my family needed when we needed it most. Joyce shook his hand. Good luck reforming the irreformable. Good luck explaining to your father why you're limping. She smiled. I'll tell him I fell while translating, technically true. As Joyce walked toward the exit, she heard Ginseng's voice one last time. The truth is a map, but every map requires blood to read. Thank you for being willing to bleed. Joyce didn't turn back, just kept walking, carrying journals that would reshape an empire and scars that would reshape her. Outside, Seoul's afternoon sun felt impossibly bright. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The Red Moon Watchers thank you. Your grandmother's student honored her memory. The distributed ledger remains secure. Joyce deleted the message and threw her phone in the nearest trash can. Some truths needed to stay buried. Others needed to burn bright enough to illuminate every shadow. She'd learned the difference. And it had cost everything. The commission reconvened at midnight in a location Duong didn't control, a traditional hanok in Seoul's Bukshan district, owned by a retired commissioner who'd left the organization decades ago to run an antique bookstore. The irony wasn't lost on Joyce. The truth would be revealed in a house built for scholars, not soldiers. 13 elders sat in a semicircle on floor cushions, their combined age approaching a millennium. These weren't the active commissioners. Those men answered to these men. The elders were the organization's founding generation, survivors who'd built criminal empires from post-war rubble and now existed as living institutional memory. Joyce knelt at the center, the journals spread before her on a low table. Her knee was properly bandaged now, pumped full of anti-inflammatories that made her thoughts slightly fuzzy. Ginseng sat to her right, Duong to her left, both men positioned like opposing attorneys waiting for a verdict. The eldest, a man introduced only as Teacher H. Wang, spoke first. His voice carried the texture of ancient paper. "Miss Pearsley, you claim to have decoded a document that accuses one of our most trusted members of patricide and treason. You understand the severity of such accusations." "I understand that truth doesn't negotiate with severity," Joyce said. "The journals exist. The code exists. The translation exists. Whether you accept it is your decision, not mine." H. Wang's eyes crinkled with something that might have been approval. "You speak boldly for someone surrounded by people who have killed for less." "I've spent 3 days surrounded by people who kill for a living. At this point, boldness is just exhaustion with a vocabulary." Joyce opened the first journal. "Your organization values precision, so let me be precise. These journals span 18 months before Ga Deong's death. They're written in a hybrid code, classical Korean grammatical structures with regional Gelato dialect vocabulary, interspersed with Sino-Korean business terminology. The complexity isn't accidental. It's designed to be readable only by someone with specific linguistic training." "Training you conveniently possess," Duong interjected smoothly. "How fortunate that a random waitress happened to have the exact skills needed to decode a document that supports her employer's narrative." "Not random. Selected. Ga Deong's mother spent years identifying potential translators. I was her 7th candidate. The first 6 either lacked the linguistic range or couldn't be trusted with family secrets." Joyce met Duong's gaze. "She chose me because I was desperate, educated, and had no connections to your world. The perfect combination of competence and controlled vulnerability." Teacher H. Wang gestured to the journals. "Demonstrate your translation. We'll verify accuracy." Joyce had prepared for this. She'd marked passages that would be independently verifiable, dates that corresponded to known events, financial figures that matched external records, names that could be cross-referenced. January 17, 2010. Entry reads, "Duong proposed expansion into Vladivostok shipping routes. Claimed Russian partnerships were secure. I accessed his private communications. He's negotiating with Solntsevskaya Bratva without commission approval. Percentages suggest he's keeping 40% for personal accounts. Confronted him. He apologized, called it entrepreneurial initiative. I don't believe him." She slid a printout across the table. "This is a banking record subpoenaed by Interpol. It shows a shell company registered to Duong receiving payments from Russian entities during this exact timeframe. Amounts match the percentages mentioned in the journal." Duong's expression remained neutral, but Joyce noticed his breathing had changed, shallower, controlled. February 3, 2010, Joyce continued. "Entry, informed Duong of my intention to leave the organization. Offered him leadership role in legitimate transition. He smiled, agreed, called it wise succession planning. But his eyes were already calculating. He doesn't want succession. He wants inheritance without the living heir." She paused, letting the words settle. March 11th, 3 days before Ga Deong's death, Duong asked detailed questions about my security protocols for the Yakuza meeting. Routes, timing, backup procedures. I answered honestly because I still believed he was protecting me. I was wrong. Tonight, I'm recording my testimony and hiding this journal. If you're reading this, I'm dead, and Duong is the reason." Teacher H. Wang's face remained impassive. Compelling narrative, but a man preparing to leave an organization might become paranoid. See Betrayal where none exists. "Then explain this." Joyce opened the second journal. March 14th, the day before the Yakuza meeting. This entry isn't in Ga Di-young's handwriting. It's in a different script, rushed, urgent. It reads, "Found these journals in husband's study. He doesn't know I read Korean. Do-seung came to the house today, told me Di-young is planning to abandon the family, leave us with nothing. Offered to protect me financially if I cooperate. I played ignorant. But I'm writing this because I need someone to know. Do-seung offered me money to provide Di-young's security schedule. I refused. He smiled and left. I think my husband is going to die tomorrow." The room went silent. "That entry," Joyce said quietly, "was written by Ga Di-young's wife, Jin Sang's mother. She died 6 months after her husband, officially ruled suicide by overdose. But the toxicology report shows a chemical compound consistent with forced ingestion." Jin Sang's hands had clenched into fists. This was new information, even to him. Do-seung finally spoke, his voice carrying the patience of a professor correcting a student. "You're presenting circumstantial evidence and emotional appeals. None of this proves I orchestrated anything. Ga Di-young was killed in a documented Yakuza ambush. Photographs exist. Witnesses exist. You're asking these elders to believe in elaborate conspiracy over documented fact. I'm asking them to compare your documented facts against documentary evidence you didn't know existed." Joyce pulled out a USB drive. "This contains the audio recording Ga Di-young made before his death, but more importantly, it contains something else. Something your grandmother never told you about." She looked at Jin Sang. "Your grandmother didn't just teach me the dialect. She recorded every lesson. Hours of audio where she discussed family history, organizational politics, and specific conversations she'd overheard between your father and Do-seung. She was building an oral archive." Joyce plugged the USB into a laptop one of the elders provided. "This recording is from March 13th, 2010. It's a conversation between Ga Di-young and Do-seung, captured by your grandmother's hidden audio system. She used to record everything in her house, a habit from decades of being married to a man whose words could get her killed." She pressed play. 2 voices emerged, one recognizable as Jin Sang's father, the other unmistakably Do-seung, younger but identical in cadence. "You're serious about leaving," Do-seung's recorded voice said. "I have to. This life, it's poison. I want my son to have a choice I never had." "And what about the people who have built their futures on your leadership? What about loyalty?" "I'm offering transition, financial security, leadership roles in legitimate enterprises. Nobody has to suffer. Except you're naive if you think the commission will allow it. They'll see it as weakness. They'll eliminate you as a liability." "Then help me convince them. You're my second, my brother, if we present a united front." "I can't do that." A pause. "Because they're right, you're a liability, and liabilities have to be cut away before they infect the whole body." Silence, then Ga Di-young's voice, barely a whisper. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm saving the organization from your sentimentality. Tomorrow's meeting won't go the way you planned. The Yakuza won't attack you, but someone will. And when you're gone, I'll ensure your family is cared for. Your son will inherit your position under my guidance. I'll make him the leader you never had the spine to be." The recording ended. The silence in the hanok was absolute. Teacher H-Wang looked at Do-seung. "Explain." Do-seung's mask finally cracked, not into panic but into something colder, calculation giving way to contempt. "You want explanation? Fine. Ga Di-young was destroying everything we built. His weakness would have collapsed the organization within 5 years. I did what was necessary. I saved us." "By committing fratricide," H-Wang said. "By preventing organizational suicide." Do-seung stood, and Joyce saw what she'd missed before, his hand moving inside his jacket. "And I'd do it again. Because men like Di-young, men who choose family over power, they don't deserve to lead. They deserve to be." Jin Sang moved faster than thought. He closed the distance between himself and Do-seung in 2 steps, his hand clamping around Do-seung's wrist before the older man could draw whatever weapon he'd concealed. "Don't," Jin Sang said. His voice was absolutely level. "You pull that gun, and you prove everything my father said about you. You die a traitor. But if you surrender, if you accept judgment, you die with some fraction of dignity intact. Duong laughed, a wet, ugly sound. Dignity? From the son who betrayed his organization to law enforcement. You're lecturing me about dignity. I'm offering you a choice my father never got. Take it or don't, but make it now. For 5 seconds, Joyce thought Duong would pull the trigger anyway. Go out in blood and fire rather than humiliation and handcuffs. Then his hand relaxed. Jinsang removed a small pistol from Duong's jacket and placed it on the table. Teacher Wang gestured to guards who'd been stationed outside. Remove him. Inform authorities he's ready for transfer. As they led Duong away, he looked back at Joyce one final time. You think you've won? You've just painted a target on yourself. The people Duong worked with won't forget, won't forgive. Then they can stand in line, Joyce said. Behind my student loans and medical bills, I've survived worse creditors. The door closed. Duong was gone. Teacher Wang turned to Joyce. Your translation is verified. Your evidence is compelling. The organization accepts your findings as factual. Joyce felt something unclench in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank us. You've just proven that our most trusted advisor spent 15 years murdering family and stealing profits. You've validated decades of suspicion some of us carried but couldn't prove. That's not victory. That's just expensive confirmation. Wang paused. Your payment will be wired as agreed. Additionally, we're establishing a scholarship in Ga Diyong's name for linguistic preservation. You'll administer it. I'm not qualified. You decoded a conspiracy using a dying dialect. You're qualified. Wang smiled without warmth. Considerate payment for carrying ghosts. They're heavier than most people realize. Jinsang walked Joyce to the door. Outside, Seoul's pre-dawn air tasted like exhaust and possibility. What happens now? Joyce asked. I rebuild, or I fail trying. Either way, I do it knowing the truth. Jinsang looked at the journals still clutched in her hands. Keep those. Publish them if you want. Academic study, historical record, whatever serves your career. They've served their purpose for me. They're evidence in multiple criminal cases. Then make copies, but the originals are yours. You earned them. Joyce hugged the journals to her chest. Your father would be proud. My father would tell me I'm an idiot for dismantling a profitable empire over principle, but he'd be an idiot with me. Jinsang extended his hand. Goodbye, Miss Pearsley. Try not to translate anything else that gets people killed. Try not to inherit anything else built on corpses. They shook hands. Then Jinsang walked back into the hanok, back into the impossible task of turning criminals into citizens. Joyce limped toward the street where a taxi idled. Aki sat in the backseat, grinning. Thought you could use a ride to the airport, the boy said. Joyce slid in beside him, exhausted beyond language. How's your brother? Surgery's scheduled. Doctors say 90% success rate. Aki's grin widened. I'm going to engineering school. Gonna build bridges instead of running drugs. Seems like a better investment. Seems smart. The taxi pulled away from the hanok. In the rearview mirror, Joyce watched the traditional house recede, a monument to old ways trying desperately to become new. Her phone buzzed. Geneva, her father's voice weak but clear. Baby girl. They said you're coming home. I'm coming home, Dad. I finished the translation. Was it worth it? Joyce looked at the journals, at the scars on her hands, at the city sliding past the window, millions of people living lives untouched by the violence she'd just helped dismantle. Ask me in a year, she said, when the nightmares stop. That's my scholar, always hedging your conclusions. She smiled. I love you, Dad. Love you too. Bring me back a story. Joyce ended the call and closed her eyes. The story was already written. In blood and dialect, and the careful translation of men who'd learned too late that some truths can't be buried. Only carried. And Joyce Pearsley, waitress and scholar, had just become the world's most dangerous courier. Because she'd learned the language of ghosts. And ghosts, it turned out, never stopped talking. 6 months later, Joyce stood in front of a renovated warehouse in East London that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The sign above the door read, Piersley Language Institute, in letters that caught afternoon sunlight like promises. Inside, 12 students sat at desks, salvaged from a closing university. Immigrants, refugees, elderly speakers of dying dialects, all gathered to preserve languages the world was forgetting. Her father watched from a wheelchair near the window, his hair thinner but his eyes sharp. The surgery had worked. The follow-up treatments had worked. He'd survived with 90% cognitive function intact, which the doctors called miraculous and Joyce called expensive grace. "You sure about this?" he asked, gesturing at the space. "Teaching pays less than waitressing, significantly less. Teaching pays in things that don't appear on tax returns." Joyce adjusted a world map on the wall, pins marking every endangered dialect her students spoke. "Besides, the scholarship fund covers operating costs. I'm not doing this for profit." "You're doing it because an old Korean woman guilted you from beyond the grave." "She didn't guilt me. She showed me that language is archaeology. Every word is a fossil of how people thought, what they valued, who they loved." Joyce paused. "If we lose the languages, we lose the evidence that these people existed. I can't let that happen." Her phone buzzed. A text from Ginsang. "Grand opening today." Joyce replied, "Students are terrified I'll make them translate crime confessions. You're not helping my reputation. Tell them you only translate for clients who pay well and don't shoot at you. Very selective clientele." She smiled. Ginsang had kept his word. The organization was dismantling, slowly, painfully, with the kind of bureaucratic friction that came from turning criminals into consultants. He'd established legitimate import businesses, invested in technology startups, even endowed a university chair in ethical business practices. The irony was so thick you could translate it into 6 languages. But the past wasn't staying buried. It kept surfacing in small ways. Last month, someone had spray-painted "Traitor" across the Institute's front door in Korean. The week before, Joyce had received an envelope containing a single spent bullet casing and a note. "Some debts compound interest." She'd reported it to the police. They'd filed it. Nothing changed. Miss Piersley, one of her students, a Syrian woman named Amira who spoke an Aramaic dialect from a village that no longer existed, raised her hand. "The lesson plan says we're documenting family stories today. What if our families are gone?" Joyce set down her marker. "Then we document what you remember, because memory is the first draft of history, and someone needs to write it down before it disappears." The class worked in concentrated silence, pens scratching across paper, old words finding new homes in notebooks that would outlive wars and displacement. Joyce moved between desks, offering guidance, correcting grammar, preserving fragments of civilizations that had survived everything except time. Her phone buzzed again. Different number, unknown. The text read, "The Red Moon Watchers request a meeting. Same location as last time. Come alone." Joyce felt ice crystallize in her chest. She thought that part of her life was finished. The distributed ledger, the hidden witnesses, the grandmother's network of fail-safes. She'd assumed it was all dormant now that Du-seung was in prison awaiting trial. Apparently, she'd assumed wrong. She texted back, "When?" "Tonight, 9 p.m., bring the key." Joyce stared at the message. What key? The brass key from Ginsang's father's crypt had been entered into evidence. The journals were archived. She didn't have any. Then she remembered. The linguistic symbol tattooed on her wrist. The one her mentor had insisted she get during their final lesson. "This is your key," the old woman had said, "to doors you don't know exist yet." Joyce had thought it was metaphorical. Apparently not. At 8:45 p.m., she locked the institute and took the tube to Southwark. The location from the text was a tea shop that fronted for God knew what, the kind of place that served excellent oolong and probably laundered money in the basement. She'd been here once before, 6 months ago, when a person claiming to represent the distributed network had thanked her for completing the mission. The shop was empty except for an elderly Korean woman behind the counter. Not her mentor. This woman was younger, maybe 70s, with the kind of face that suggested she'd survived occupations and dictatorships and Christmas with difficult relatives. "Miss Pearsley, you came." The woman locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed. "I'm Teacher Seo. I was Ga Di-young's mother's oldest friend. We maintained the network together." "What network exactly?" "Insurance. Your mentor, we called her Teacher Min. She believed that truth needed redundancy. So we built a system. Multiple witnesses, each with pieces of the story, each programmed to activate if certain conditions were met." Teacher Seo poured 2 cups of tea that smelled like jasmine and secrets. "Do-seung's arrest was condition 1. His trial is approaching, condition 2. We need to prepare for condition 3. "Which is?" "His acquittal." Joyce felt her stomach drop. He confessed, on tape, in front of the commission. Confessions can be recanted. Evidence can be suppressed. Juries can be bought. Teacher Seo sipped her tea. "Do-seung has resources we didn't account for, allies in political positions. His lawyers are arguing entrapment, coercion, fabricated evidence. They're building a narrative where you and Ginseng are the villains, opportunists who framed a loyal servant to steal an organization." "That's insane. That's expensive legal representation." Teacher Seo set down her cup. "Which is why we need the final key, the evidence even Do-seung doesn't know exists." "I don't have any more evidence. I gave everything to the authorities." "Not everything. Teacher Min gave you something the day before she died, something you've carried ever since." Teacher Seo pointed to Joyce's wrist. "The symbol, it's not decorative, it's a cipher." Joyce looked at her tattoo, a complex character that resembled Korean script but wasn't quite right. "A cipher for what?" "For accessing the master ledger. The original document that Ga Di-young created before distributing pieces to his mother. It's encrypted in a way that requires 2 elements, the physical key from his crypt and the visual key on your wrist. One without the other is useless." "The physical key is in evidence lockup." "No, it's in Ginseng's possession. He reclaimed it after providing testimony. He's been keeping it safe, waiting for someone to tell him what it actually opens." Teacher Seo pulled out a tablet, showing an image of a safety deposit box. "This box has been in a Seoul bank vault for 15 years. It requires both keys to access. Inside is evidence that will destroy not just Do-seung, but the entire network of officials who have protected him. Names, payments, recordings of conversations with politicians and judges." Joyce felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. "Why didn't you use this before?" "Because opening it burns every bridge, exposes everyone, creates enemies across multiple governments. We were hoping the existing evidence would be enough, but Do-seung's lawyers are too good. We need the nuclear option." "And if I refuse?" "Then Do-seung walks free in approximately 4 months. He reclaims his organization. And the first thing he does is eliminate everyone who testified against him, including you, including your father, including Ginseng and every person who helped translate those journals." Joyce's tea had gone cold. "You're saying I don't actually have a choice." "You have the same choice Teacher Min had, the same choice Ga Di-young had, comfort or truth, safety or justice. You can walk away from this, live quietly, hope Do-seung forgets about you." Teacher Seo's eyes carried the weight of decades. "Or you can finish what we started, burn it all down, make sure the truth survives even if we don't." Joyce thought about her students, about Amira documenting a village that no longer existed, about her father, who taught her that some stories were worth dying to preserve. "When do we leave for Seoul?" she asked. Teacher Seo smiled. "Tomorrow. Ginseng is already en route. We'll meet him at the bank. You'll present both keys. We'll extract the master ledger and deliver it to international prosecutors before Do-seung's people can interfere." "And if they interfere anyway?" "Then we implement Condition 4, the final protocol, complete distribution of all evidence to every media outlet in 6 countries. It destroys Do-seung, but it also destroys any chance of organizational reform. Ginseng's legitimate businesses collapse. Everyone associated with the family name becomes radioactive. It's mutually assured destruction. Ginseng agreed to this. Ginseng understands that some prices must be paid. He's willing to sacrifice his future to ensure his father's truth survives. Teacher Seo stood. The question is whether you're willing to sacrifice yours. Joyce looked at her tattoo, a key she'd been carrying for 7 years without knowing what it opened. Now she knew. It opened the door between the person she'd been, a waitress trying to save her father, and the person she was becoming, someone who carried ghosts, someone who translated truth regardless of cost. "I'll need to arrange coverage for my classes," Joyce said. "Already done. We've hired substitutes. Your father will be protected by private security. Your students will be monitored. We've thought of everything." "Except whether I'd say yes." "We knew you'd say yes, because you're teacher Min's student, and she only chose people who couldn't walk away from unfinished translations." Teacher Seo handed Joyce a plane ticket. "Seoul, tomorrow at 6 p.m. Bring nothing but yourself and the key you've been carrying." Joyce took the ticket. "If this goes wrong..." "It won't go wrong. It will go exactly as catastrophically as predicted. The only variable is whether we control the catastrophe or it controls us." Joyce left the tea shop and walked into London's November cold. Her phone buzzed. Ginseng. "They contacted you." "Yes, you knew." "I authorized it. We're out of options, Joyce. Duong lawyers are destroying our credibility. We need the master ledger or he walks. And if releasing it destroys everything you've built." Silence. Then, "My father tried to build something legitimate and died for it. I'd rather die trying to finish his work than live watching Duong profit from murdering him. Wouldn't you?" Joyce thought about her institute, her students, the fragile ecosystem of preservation she'd created. Then she thought about what happened when people like Duong won, when truth became negotiable, when justice was just another commodity for sale to the highest bidder. "I'll see you in Seoul," she said. "Bring the key, and Joyce, say goodbye to your students properly. There's a chance we won't make it back." The call ended. Joyce stood outside her institute, looking at the sign that bore her name. Inside, 12 languages were being preserved, 12 civilizations refusing to die quietly. She'd built this with blood money and translated ghosts. Now she'd defend it the same way. Her phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number, a single sentence. "The past never stays buried. It just waits for someone brave enough to dig." Joyce smiled. She'd been digging for 7 years. Time to see what was left at the bottom.